it's wonderful to want to help the environment and want to help others, but to be able to keep doing that long term, you need to have a way to support yourself in that
Welcome to the
process.
Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Fryatt, and their guests. Please use your own discretion and research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts, Marian and Janice.
Hello, everyone. This is Marianne, and I'm here with Linda. And would you pronounce your name? Because I'm like so bad at butchering everybody's name.
My name is Linda Kelso.
Thank you. I might have gotten that one right, but I literally have practiced names before, and then I get on air and I say them wrong. So I just figured you know your name better. So Linda is a fellow podcaster, which I'm very excited about. And we connected via Instagram because she does all kinds of cool things in the world of plants and landscaping and saving the earth. We are like soul sisters there. Thank you for doing all of that. I wanted to ask you first, when did your love for nature start, Linda?
Oh, I think it's always been there. I've always really loved to just be out in nature. Like I feel very peaceful when I'm outdoors and relaxed and kind of more centered when I'm outside. So I just remember feeling that way from a very young age. In terms of gardening, like my dad always had a garden and always gardened. So I started with that when I was really young too. So I would say all my life.
Very cool. You grew up in a garden. I did too.
Yeah.
When you are exposed as a child to a garden, it just goes into your body consciousness somehow, so that you can help yourself later. Did you choose a career in nature or in gardening when you grew up?
Not at first. I went to college and I really didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do for a living. Like I feel like some people, they just know all their lives what they want to do, and I'm not one of those people.
Me neither.
I majored in psychology, and I even went to graduate school for that. And the kind of psychology I was studying was experimental psychology, which means a lot of time spent indoors in a laboratory setting. That was like 18, 19, 20, 21. I don't know. I just feel like I didn't know a lot about myself at that time. And so all I knew was that I was getting really depressed being inside the lab. I couldn't get myself motivated. There was just not anything in me. I had to work on a thesis, and I just had to like force myself to do that. And it was not working out. And so I ended up quitting grad school, and I just took an office job. I worked as like an administrative assistant and a bookkeeper for a while, and then went and worked with a small business. It was like a green cleaning company. At about that point, I started to realize, well, I really like this idea of starting your own business and running your own business. The cleaning company, like I said, had a very eco-friendly focus. And I was like, I think I'd like to start a business that is an environmentally friendly one. Kind of ended up moving back to my hometown where I had grown up. And at that point, was still working like in these administrative kind of jobs and was just getting more and more miserable because I was inside all the time. And I feel like more alive and more peaceful when I'm outdoors. So I was like, I need something to just break me out of this. And I ended up taking a job on the weekends at a local greenhouse, and I loved it. It was really fun. I was outdoors. I was interacting with gardeners, and heard two customers talking about the Master Gardener program, which is it's this association. It's all around the country, the U.S. They help home gardeners. It's volunteer led. And I was like, that sounds interesting. So I was like, well, when winter comes, I can't work at this job. So I want to try out the Master Gardener program. So I got into that. And then I just started to realize I wanted to know more about horticulture on a deeper level. And that turned into taking some classes at a community college, which turns into a degree in landscape design and maintenance. And then I started my own company out of that.
Wow. There's a lot I'm hearing here. And one thing is, said you had a lot of business knowledge before you started your company, which is very cool because it sounds to me like you have a passion-driven company, but so many people start with a passion only and they have to put that whole business aspect into place. And sometimes it doesn't fall into place. You know, a lot of passion-driven companies are not doing so well to provide income. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you out of curiosity about your master gardening program in your area. Was it a pretty open approach program or is it very exclusive?
So it really depends on the program where you are. So these are the Master Gardener program. They're run out of land grant colleges, and the land grant college in Pennsylvania is Penn State University. And the specific program that I applied to, you had to fill out an application, and then you came in and they interviewed you. They were finding out horticultural knowledge, but more important than that, I think they were trying to find out, are you personable? Do you want to share what you know? Kind of, do you have that giving spirit in you? Because that's what you do as a master gardener. You're helping other people. And I passed the interview. So then you had to go into training. And at the time I did it, it was several months of training over the winter. And then you take one final big test, and then you're a master gardener.
And did you have a lot of people in the program? I'm asking because we do have one in San Diego, which takes very limited amount of people. And they only do a training every other year. And then I have friends which did the master gardener training in Los Angeles, where they were like, oh, there were hundreds and hundreds of people in the training, and they just wanted to get as many people with the knowledge as possible. So I was just wondering what your experience was.
It was probably in the middle of that. I mean, not everybody who applied got in, but I think a lot of them did. I have a friend, I actually interviewed her for an episode of my podcast. She's the master gardener coordinator in my local area. And she was saying even like a county over from where I am, like it's a completely different way that they handle it. So yeah, I would say mine was in between, like let everybody in and super, super exclusive.
So it just really depends on the area. Mm-hmm. So one more question, which is pet peeve of our organic gardening teacher I have taken quite a few classes from. She was, well, they are funded by universities, and a lot of the university funding comes from big agricultural industries. Mm-hmm. And said master gardeners are actually maybe not pushing, but definitely talking about pesticides and herbicides, and said GMO stuff is okay. Mm-hmm. Did you find that as something you had to do, or are you able to promote the organic or permaculture related methods?
So whenever I went through it, and I'm not a master gardener anymore. Between starting my business, I couldn't keep up with it. So I did it for about a year. And within that time, I noticed the presence of those kind of things when they would do public displays. Like if you would go to the local fair and they would usually have a booth set up or a display set up. And there was that presence, like it was sponsored by the pesticide company. And that did give me concern. It is one of the other reasons other than time that I didn't continue on with the program, because I grew more and more uncomfortable with that. But in talking to the coordinator that I interviewed, I had asked her, do you promote permaculture or do you promote more sustainable methods? And she said yes. And they did cover that in my training too. Like for instance, their pest management approach is called integrated pest management, which I also have an online course that I created that's based around that. And pesticide use, it's kind of like a tiered approach to dealing with pests. And you start off with manual removal of them, and it goes all the way up to using chemical control. So there is some element of that definitely in that program. Yeah, it just depends on which program you're utilizing.
Yeah, and I was thinking of applying, and then they asked that question if I would be comfortable to promote pesticides, herbicide use, and I just couldn't answer that with yes, you know. So I was like, okay, not going to do this one. So you mentioned your online course. Would you tell me more about that?
Yes, I actually have three online courses. I have one that shows you how to create a bird and butterfly filled yard. It's basically different ways that you can garden that's going to attract beneficial insects and birds and other beneficial animals. And I have one that is on earth-friendly pest control, and it's based around integrated pest management. And then the other one is DIY landscape design. So basically, I took what I learned in my design courses and I structured it as this online class that homeowners can use if they want to design, their own gardens.
Very cool. Now, you do offer a free course, right? Which one
Yes.
is your free course?
Yes, that's if you go to my website, LK Landscape Design, there is a link there for a free online course, and that is called Earth Friendly Gardening Season by Season. And I have a lesson for spring, summer, fall, and winter. And I just go through different ways that you can, design and create and maintain your garden throughout the year using more sustainable methods.
And is it geared towards beginners or
Mhm.
more people which already have some gardening knowledge?
It could be both. If you're a beginner, you could dive in, and there's definitely going to be techniques you're going to pick up there and ideas that you're going to get there. And even if you're a more advanced gardener, sometimes there's still more to learn in terms of gardening in a more sustainable manner. So I would say there's a range, but definitely a beginner could take this course and get a lot out of it.
Great. Yeah, I asked my daughter-in-law to sign up for it because I wanted to get feedback from somebody who is not deeply involved in that whole gardening community and so forth. And she was at my house when she started taking it, and I saw her get really involved in looking at at her phone. And then she said, Jada, yeah, I really got a lot out of it. So I wanted to give you
Oh,
that feedback.
thank
You're
you. I'm
welcome.
so glad to hear it.
And I know pricing can change with time, but as of now in 2017, how much are your paid courses?
It's going to vary. If they're not on sale, they're anywhere from 50 to maybe $90. However, I often offer them for sale. And I actually will share some links with you that your listeners can get them for $10 each if they like.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you so much. I love it when guests give value to our listeners because, we really, really want to achieve with our podcast to make it possible for people
Hmm.
to learn more, because I truly believe that everybody wants to do good, but we just not always know
Yeah.
how to go about things. Just even having interviewed as many people as I have now, I have learned so much. It's amazing. And so I'm learning from you. That's fantastic. That's really cool. I want to hear a little bit more about your business first, because how are you going about building your business? So if I understand you right, you have a physical business where you do
Mhm.
landscape designs, right? And then you have your online business where you have your
Mhm.
courses. And is there another aspect of your business I'm missing?
Those are the two main aspects. There's like a local aspect to it where I offer design and maintenance services, and then there's the online aspect where I have the online courses and like my podcast and blog.
Right. So tell me about when you decided to step out into your own business. What kind of steps did you put into action? So if we have somebody out here who is as passionate like you are about helping the earth, how would you turn it into a business that you actually could escape that
Oh.
office routine?
Uh, I mean, I think everybody's journey is different. I would say for somebody that just kind of had that itch, take that desire to help the environment, but also to create a business that could sustain them. I'm always going to recommend learning more about the business aspect of it. I think almost that could come before you have the idea of exactly what you want to do to bring in income. I look back at this 15 years of administrative kind of work and office management work. And at first I thought, oh, what a waste. I put 15 years into that. But that really does help my business function much, much better than if I hadn't had it. I understand how to do so many administrative things and look into my finances and just even dealing with clients and good customer service. All of that plays a part. So, if you are in a place where you could maybe go to your local community college and take a business class or sign up for a business course online, or my courses, I sell them through a website called Udemy, but there are tons of business related courses on there as well. So you could just take a $10 or $15 business course to get an introduction to it. So I would say that first. If you can find a course that focuses on entrepreneurship, do that, because that's going to help you brainstorm and it's going to help you figure out how to take an idea and make it into something that can be self-sustaining and that can sustain you, because it's wonderful to want to help the environment and want to help others. But to be able to keep doing that long term, you need to have a way to support yourself in that process. And I think a business background can really set you up for a good foundation. Once you do have your idea, then I would say just get started. I lacked a lot of confidence before I started my business. I just felt like, I don't know, I just felt like all I could think of were all the things that could go wrong or all the ways that I would mess up. And I remember taking a class it was a landscape maintenance class, and we were learning to use heavy machinery like front loaders and, like those lawnmowers that the professionals use, the really big ones. And I had never used any of that. And I got into that class and I was the only woman in that class, and I was so intimidated. And I was intimidated by having to use all these big machines, and I was intimidated by being the only woman, and I was worried that these guys would look down on me. And what actually came out of that was that they didn't look down on me. The guys were really helpful in that class. They were really kind and really inclusive with me. But also, a lot of those guys hadn't used those machines either. And instead of approaching them with this spirit of fear or this spirit of what's going to go wrong, like they were just confident, like it was fun for them. They were like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I realized that a lot of them had started businesses with that same attitude. Like they didn't have the background or the training that I had, but they just did it anyway. And they were somehow confident that it was going to work out. And it was really after I took that class that I was like, you know what? I can start my own business. Like I can make this happen. I don't have to have all the pieces in order. I don't have to have this feeling that I know everything. Like I can just do it. And so that's what I would say to somebody too. I feel like especially to maybe the women who are listening to this and thinking about starting a business, because this comes up in conversations I have with other women friends who have been thinking about businesses. Like you've got to move forward, and the confidence will come out of that and the knowledge will come out of that. You don't have to have all of that in place beforehand.
So it's good to have some knowledge, but confidence is almost more important, right? So that's not to say that confidence replaces knowledge. You just have the confidence that you will be able to find the tools you need to find, right? Yeah, I love that. And I can so relate. I'm always so intimidated when I have to work with big power tools or stuff like that. It really is like you have to use a tactic to overcome that. I'm still also finding, well, if I know somebody who is already an expert and they're willing to help me, I utilize that. I don't have to do it all.
Yeah, at the end of that class, I was like, I think that I would subcontract some of the big machinery stuff out. But it was good to have the experience of using it and knowing that I could do it, and it wasn't this impossible thing that I had kind of built it up to be.
So that's actually really valuable too, so that you can take a class to find out that I really don't want to do that part and I'm willing to pay somebody else to do that. So that's a real valuable takeaway as well. Definitely. So you took classes, you already had business knowledge. What are you doing to build your business?
Well, I have to say, I was just having this conversation with a friend. Building my business a lot of times feels like just like throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks and what works. So I really started out within my circle of family and friends. Those were the first people that were hiring me. And then they referred me out to other people, and my business grew from that. So it started with referrals, and that still continues to be a really valuable way that especially my local business is growing. Now, other things I do is I have a blog and I started the podcast. So I'm getting content out there. I feel like when people are thinking about hiring somebody to come to their home and do work, you want to have a sense of, does this person know what they're talking about? And can I just get a sense of them as a person? So the blog and the podcast that's part of the purpose that they're serving. It's to educate, but it's also to give a sense of who I am as a person so people can be more comfortable about having me do work for them. And then this year too, I am advertising through Facebook and Google Ads, and that's been a steep learning curve for me. Those are hard. Those are hard. I consider myself pretty good with computers and other technical things, but I've been taking online courses and stuff to learn more about how to advertise through Google and Facebook. So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
I saw that you had gone to farmers markets. Are you still doing that?
Yes. Yeah, I've done that. I started that 2 years ago, I think, and I'm on my third year. And that's actually been a really great way to grow my business because, again, it comes down to people can talk with me and meet me and get a sense of who I am. And every year that I've done that, I've had long-term clients come out of that.
So it sounds like you're doing a lot of things to establish that you're an authority, that you know what you're talking about, and using the podcast in your blog and your personal appearance at the farmer's market to bring that across. And then it sounds like referrals are a wonderful way, which means you're doing good work that people want to refer you.
Yeah.
It's not all about hacking advertisement or stuff like that. You do need to do follow up with,
yeah.
doing stuff. So, yeah. Would you share some of the things you're covering in your podcast?
Yes. This is the first year I'm doing it, so this is my first season. And there are three main focuses of it this season. In the first part, which is just wrapping up, I'm talking about earth-friendly gardening in general. And I find that you need to build a foundation for people about what sustainable means and even more important than that, why it's important and why they should care as a home gardener. So the first few episodes, I talk about ecosystems and what that is and why that plays into having a more productive, healthy garden. And I talk about native plants, which are plants that are native to your area and why those are a good choice to include in your landscape or in your garden. So things like that. And then in the next part, which is just about to start, I'm going to be covering earth-friendly garden maintenance. So how you can conserve water, how you can really look at your soil as really the foundation to a healthy garden. It starts in the soil. And garden tools. I think the next episode that's going to come out is about kind of the key garden tools to have and how to maintain them. Because really, if you have the right tools and you're using them the right way, that's leading to healthier plants and more productive plants. And that in turn can be a less reliance on pesticides and herbicides. And then in the last part of the podcast, it'll be about earth-friendly design. So how to really start out and create a garden from the ground up that is going to be more sustainable.
I have to ask you for a tip. I'm living right next to one of those homeowner associations run places, and they use Roundup to control weeds. And what kind of tip can you give me to either approach them or even you're just going down the street? I had said haven't said I taking my grandson or my dogs for a walk, and here's somebody with the spray thing and surrounder bottle and, spraying away at kind of
Oh.
already dead grass, not even understands that if you use it, you have to use it in an active growth cycle. And I
Hmm.
want to say something to him, and a couple of times I have, and I get like eyes rolling, you know? And it's like, what can I do to make you understand that you're not only poisoning yourself, you're poisoning me as well, So do you have a good tip for that?
Oh man. I think a lot of that is most effective when it comes out of relationship. So, and if they can see a different way working out effectively. So, I think that here in America, we have bought into this idea that a healthy garden is a chemical filled garden, or a healthy lawn is one that's full of chemicals. And I also think that we have kind of a skewed sense of what is healthy. Like we think it means all the leaves on our plants are perfect and the grass is green and lush all the time and we don't see any bugs anywhere. Like I run into that kind of definition of perfection a lot. And when the truth is, like anything outdoors, anything anywhere is part of an ecosystem. And so a few chewed up leaves on a plant is not a big deal. And you want to see bugs in your yard. The lawn is fine even if it turns a little bit brown when there's less water, like the lawn is still alive. So part of it, I think, not just directly speaking to your neighbor, but part of it is redefining how we view our yards and how we define perfection. And then the other part of it is realizing that chemicals are not always the answer, and that there are a lot of different ways to create a space that's beautiful to you, but that is also like beneficial to the animals and other insects that are out there. So, with your neighbors specifically, I know when I've been in similar situations, I do exactly what you do. Like if I'm in conversation with them, maybe like I'll suggest that there's a different way. But I also know that it's most productive with people and change most often happens within the context of a more ongoing relationship. So one example is I'm actually just wrapping up a design for a client and they live in a pretty standard homeowners association neighborhood. All the landscaping kind of looks similar, blah, blah, blah. But they wanted something a little bit different to start with, but they didn't know a lot about plants and they didn't know a lot about native plants in particular. So through the course of going through the design, I just suggested it to them. And I showed them pictures and I kind of talked them through why it was beneficial. And it actually wasn't a hard sell. Like they went for those choices and now their landscape is going to include some of those things within the bounds of what their homeowners association allows and within the bounds of what they think is attractive. So I don't know how you just convince your neighbor outside of growing that relationship and then also modeling what a more earth-friendly space can look like, because it's hard. It's hard to go up against generations of being taught one way of having a yard. It's really challenging.
It is. We have quite a trend in Southern California to go for native plants because we have
Hmm.
gone through such a long drought, and people are realizing that green lawns are a huge waste of water when you live in a semi-desert. My only concern is that a lot of the native plant people are into first killing everything with herbicide before you plant the new stuff, and it
Oh,
just really breaks my heart. It's like, no, let's just replace it slowly, and if some comes up you
right.
don't like, you can always cut it down and use it as much. So
Yes.
yeah, it's sometimes a double-edged sword, so to speak. Yeah. When you do your designs, do you try to introduce people to your idea of maintaining and creating a landscape, or are people already attracted to you because of what you're standing for?
Right now, it's mostly me introducing them to it. I think that as I become more established and build up more of a reputation for sustainable design, it'll flip. But right now, what it usually looks like is somebody is looking for a design, they hire me, and then in the meeting, I'm introducing them to the idea of using native plants and creating a garden in a more sustainable way. And I have to say, I live in a very traditional sort of area. Like people tend to do things here the way they've done them for generations. Like change doesn't happen very quickly. But I have been very pleasantly surprised because I think in every instance that I have suggested this or brought this up, the response has been really positive. I think that, like you said, in California with the drought, there is more and more of an awareness that there are problems in the environment. And I think that people do want to do something to help. They just don't know how. And they maybe don't even have a sense as homeowners that there is something they can do that would make a difference. So I feel like almost what I'm doing is putting tools in their hands that they can use to affect change. And I found a lot of openness to that.
Nice. I think that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish with our podcast too, is that
Mhm.
a lot of times we might not even know how our actions affect the environment as a whole, or even what can I do as a one little person to affect things. And
Yeah.
I'm giving a not garden related example right now, but somebody just posted, said if you even bring your own bag once to the store, if everybody does it worldwide, it's so much plastic which is not going into the landfill.
Mm.
Just this one little action does have an effect. And in the plant world, even more so, because you're putting in native plants, so you're supporting the insect population and other animals which needs that particular plant and so forth. And why is that a good thing, Linda?
Because it's all part of an ecosystem and we're part of that too. And if the ecosystem suffers, we eventually suffer too. Just that small example of using native plants, the plants that are commonly used in a lot of landscape design, at least around where I live, are non-native. They come from all different areas of the world. Some of them, they're coming from Asia or India or Europe. And part of that is wonderful because you have a lot of variety to pick from. Being part of an ecosystem, whatever happens in that ecosystem ultimately affects us. When you're using native plants, you're using something that co-evolved with the animals that are already in your environment. So the birds and the insects and everything like that for millions of years have built up this relationship with certain plants and the other animals in that ecosystem. So when you use those plants, you're providing shelter and food and a place for them to lay their eggs and raise their young in a way that has happened over this very long period of time. But a lot of other landscape plants that are really popular, like maybe rhododendrons or azaleas or daylilies, or I'm naming some of the ones that are popular where I live, those come from different areas of the world. And there's nothing inherently wrong with those plants. It's just that the animals in your backyard didn't co-evolve with those plants. And so maybe they can make use of them. Maybe they can eat them. It just depends. But I heard one speaker say that a lot of times those kind of plants to the animals in your backyard, they're sort of just like statues. They really might not be a place to get food or to get shelter. So if you have a yard or if you have a lot of yards in your neighborhood that are full of non-native plants, you are severely limiting where those animals can find food or shelter. Yeah, that's why using native plants is one really simple, small step you can take that can improve the environment for just the birds and animals and insects and everything that are around you.
Right. I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of pollinators because
Mhm.
there has been so much in the news about bees dying and so forth. And realistically, a lot of the bees we're talking about, they're immigrants, right? They're European bees.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason we need pollinators is to create the fruit we want to eat, right?
Yes.
In San Diego, for example, there, I don't want to say it's a wrong number now, but it's several hundred varieties of native bees.
Mm,
And some of those native bees need a very specific plant. They only feed on one or two plants. And
mm-hmm.
some of them are in a very specific microclimate. But they all do that job of pollinating. So it's not just the European honeybee, which is a pollinator. There are so many different insects out there which are doing the job. Let's say that whole bee death continues, and
Mm-hmm.
I would think most of our listeners are familiar with that because that has made it to major national news. We still would have all those other pollinators which can step in. But if we don't have food for
Mm-hmm.
them, if we don't have those native plants around, they're going to go too. So, Linda, tell me a little bit more about the offer you have for our listeners about your course. How can we access it? I definitely will. You will send me a link and I put it in the show notes. But just tell us a little bit more about the course and why people should take it.
So there's 3 courses that I will share discounts on. One of them is the DIY landscape design course, which is for homeowners. Maybe you've wanted to redesign a part of your landscape or your garden and you've looked into a designer, but that can be pricey. So this is a course that will show you the techniques that the designers are going to use, which might be a little bit different from how a homeowner approaches it. A lot of times, a homeowner thinks about maybe the plants first, but a designer is going to think about solving problems and dealing with certain issues and also making a comfortable space. And so I'm just going to take you step by step through how I approach a design and how I think about it. And there's worksheets and everything like that that you can use. And the other course is the gardening to create a bird and butterfly friendly yard. That's going to have a lot of really fun DIY projects. And it's also going to show you a little bit more about creating that ecosystem that's going to encourage those animals to move in. And then the final one is the Earth Friendly Pest Control course, which will just teach you a series of steps that you can go through to not only control pests that you might have right now, but to create a more sustainable space that's going to attract beneficial insects and natural predators so that you can rely less on chemical control and more on these earth-friendly methods. And the coupons that I'm going to be sharing, there's just going to be a link. You click on the link, it'll give you the discounted price automatically, and each of those will be $10.
Wonderful. So can you give me a tip for ants right now? I have them crawling all over my pop filter on my microphone right now.
Oh no.
I know. We have Argentinian ants in San Diego, which have taken over, and they're actually pushing out a lot of the native ant population. They're just ferocious. They come into the house for water, for if you leave anything out, or if you have nothing. Like in this room, there's no food, there's nothing which should attract them, and they're still coming in.
Oh my goodness, I feel so bad for you. One of the things I talk about in the pest control course is non-native, like invasive species, because they are their own special category. So a lot of the more sustainable methods, it's hard to find one that'll work for them. Like they don't have natural predators. Sometimes they don't respond to the more organic methods. So if you're dealing with an invasive species, especially, what I would do is do research on it, find the recommended control methods for that species. You might have to use a more chemically based control method, but see if there's like organic chemicals that you can use. And when you're doing your research, you want to find, if you're going to use a chemical control, something that breaks down quickly, something that is very specific in targeting the insect so you're not hurting anything else. And you want to know exactly when in the insect's life cycle to apply that. Sometimes with invasives that, because a lot of the natural predator stuff doesn't exist, you have to use a more extreme method of dealing with them. So for your Argentinian ants, I can't give you anything specific because I'm not an expert on those, but I would say do some research into that specific species and see what people suggest and see if you can find, if it has to be chemical control, like an organic method to do that.
So I have a follow-up questions on that. I have used borax honey mixtures in the
Mm.
past. If an ant eats that and then a lizard eats the ant, will it affect the lizard?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. That is definitely another thing to research and definitely a good question to ask. Whenever you are using any kind of chemical control, people tend to think of it as it's only going to deal with this one specific plant or one specific insect that I'm targeting. But a lot of times that's not the case. And, like we were talking about with ecosystems, if you use a control method, like a chemical control method on one insect or anything else, it eats it. If something else eats that, it can move up and up the food chain. So that's a great question. I don't know the specific answer to it, but it's definitely something to research.
Yeah, I will do that for sure. Linda, thank you so much. You have answered so many questions, and say how people can find your podcast again.
Oh, yeah. So you can go to my website, which is lklandscapedesign.com. The podcast is accessible through there. The free course we talked about, you can get there, and my blog is on there as well. But you can also find the podcast on Stitcher or iTunes or Pocket Cast. It's on iHeartRadio. So almost anywhere I think that you would be listening to podcasts, it should be available. It's called The Earth Friendly Gardener.
I love it. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you all are checking out Linda's podcast. She has so much good information, and I think you really, really get a lot out of it. And hey, take those courses. What a deal. Linda, thank you so much. And I said it before and I say it again. I love it when our guests are helping you, our listeners, to learn more and to give you discounts. Our goal is always to bring value to you. Hopefully, we do that. So let us know. One of the ways you can let us know is on Instagram. We have talked about Instagram in this show. This is where Linda and I met. And right now, Janice and I are taking turns. So when you go to Sustainable Living Podcast on Instagram, 1 week, you're going to hear from Janice, and 1 week you're going to hear from me. But we both love it if you give us your feedback, if you tell us what you think, follow us, interact with us. And speaking of support, if you feel like supporting us, we have a Patreon account. And now when you go to our website, there's actually a button you can click on and it takes you right over there to Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a site developed for people to support artists, podcasters, people which are in the creative field, to bring our free product to you and still be able to pay for our expenses. So we have like lots of different levels. We are starting at $1 a month support, and every dollar helps to keep that show on the air. So hop on over and pledge your $1 or $5 or $100, whatever you want to do. We love it all. Thank you so much. Take good care.